Hello. Today we're going to talk about the PfMP, or the Portfolio Management Certification. Who am I? I'm Stephen Mitchell. I'm simply a PfMP certification holder, and these are things that I wish I would have known during the exam, or just things that I want to present to help you along your process if you choose to go for that exam. So let's get right into it. We're going to have a 4-part series. In part 1, which is this one, we're going to go over what is the PfMP. It sounds pretty common. It's a portfolio management exam. However, there's a lot of misconceptions on what it is. 2, we're going to get into the application process if you confirm that it's right for you. Part 3, we're going to go over reference material. What should you be looking at? In part 4, we're going to get into, I'm going to say, specific exam content specific to the portfolio exam itself. So let's just get right into it. So is the PfMP right for you? Is it something you should be going for? Should you be going for a different certification based on what your personal goals are? Let's talk about it. And in order to start off, we're going to talk about what the most common misconception is about portfolio management. And that is that it's simply the sum of a lot of different projects. And that's simply not true. And we'll get into why that's a common misconception. But to give the example, project management is a specific set of tools, techniques, processes, steps, things that you should do in order to execute a project. Portfolio management is not doing that times 2, times 5, times 10, or by however many projects you have. It's a totally different realm. So knowing what it's not, let's talk about what it is. I'm going to break it up. I'm going to oversimplify it, but I'm going to put it into 2 steps. Portfolio management deals with strategic understanding, identifying what the strategy is, analyzing what the strategy is, and then part 2 is turning that into something tangible, something that's executable to realize that strategy. So we can see just based on the definition alone that what I just described is not project management. So the misconception is that when you look at a portfolio, you see a bunch of projects, which is true. A portfolio does consist of a bunch of projects. However, the act of portfolio management is not doing everything on a project level bigger or more or whatever. So first of all, if you would like to do project management or program management or portfolio management, there are other certifications out there. So now that we know what it is, let's get to some other questions. That being, do you indeed need a PMP or a PGMP, which is program management, in order to sit for the PfMP or the portfolio management exam? The answer to that question is no, you do not. You don't need any of those certifications as a prerequisite. However, if you do not have any of those certifications, or if you are not well versed on what those are, I would highly suggest you go back and do at least some high-level learning on them, because you are being tested, or the exam deals with portfolio management task items. And you can inherently think you're doing something good for the portfolio when in reality you are doing project management steps or you're doing program management steps. Therefore, you'd be getting those answers wrong, thinking it's great, but in reality you're not specifically doing portfolio level items. So if you don't have a certification, it's perfectly fine in those other areas. However, you do want to be at least well versed on the delineation between what project, program, and portfolio steps are. So I'll just leave that out there. So let's talk about potentially what the similarities are between portfolio management and project management, and let's talk about maybe what some of the differences are. So assuming if you're going for the PfMP, you do have some level of project management knowledge, because you would have had to have gone through at least some of those steps to get to that point of operating a portfolio. So I personally did a 3-part series on project management, and I'm going to throw that in the chat to have a reference. So I'm not going to go over the details, but let's just talk in general relative to the previous series that I personally did on project management. What are some of the similarities? In part 1 of that project management series, we talked about exam strategy. How should you approach the exam? What should you expect? Everything from that part that we went over is indeed still valid if you want to look at that video for the PfMP exam. Why? Because at the end of the day, PMI, it's still a PMI exam, and the approach, the general approach of how things are written is still the same. So those tricks that we talked about in part 1 of the project management series, because it's still a PMI exam, still are valid for the portfolio level exam also. So if you want to come up with a plan and understand how to attack the actual exam, I'll just link that video so you can take a look at that. Part 2, in that series, we talked about pitfalls, things that are going to intentionally try to trip you up on that exam. Everything from that second part is indeed still valid, because once again, it's still a PMI exam. In that video, we talked about project specific items instead of portfolio level items, but the tricks and how they're presented are 100% still valid. Part 3 of that series in project management is not valid because in that part we went specifically over project management reference material. So obviously that's not going to be applicable to the PfMP. However, in parts 3 and 4 of this series, it will be replaced by that. We're going to talk about portfolio level items specifically. So with that, those are the similarities if you want to use that as a reference. What are the differences? One is, if you did go through the PMP process, or you're familiar with it at least, one of the first things you'll find in portfolio management is that the abundance of material that you saw in project management is just not quite there. I'm going to give you some statistics. This is just a quick internet search. Feel free to disagree with these statistics if you like, but quick internet search says that for the PMP, there were roughly 1 million holders of the PMP in 2023. In 2025, that number is currently about 1.5 million, maybe up to 1.7 million. So you can see not only are there a lot of certifications out there, but that number is consistently growing almost exponentially. So what you'll find is of a similar surge of portfolio certification holders. As of 2023, it comes up to be about 1,700. So automatically here we're seeing the disparities between 1 million versus 1,700. I actually cannot find a lot of data of the current amount of holders in 2025. However, let's go ahead and assume maybe it's 2,000. But even if it's higher or lower that, we're still talking about the lower thousands versus the millions, or almost 2 million soon. So the amount of material, if you get stumped on the PfMP preparation, it may not be out there. So how do we get around that? So we just use things like this as a forum. You may have to dig a little deeper. You may have to scratch the surface a little bit. If you stumble across something, go ahead and try to reach out to somebody who's a PfMP certification holder, or use similar venues to find out. But don't get discouraged. Don't get frustrated if the answers are not all at your fingertips. So you just have to try a little harder than you would have on the PMP or anything project management related. Use this platform for comments, questions. Project management websites, you still can use those for portfolio management. Something similar to Rita M. I've talked about this book in depth. I personally could not find an equivalent book like that to portfolio management. If you have a venue for test prep or exam prep where the questions are broken out into knowledge areas instead of just giving you a general exam, please post that. Let's put that out. Let's help a lot of other people who are in that same situation. So with that, hopefully we just simply understand what the PfMP is, if it's right for you. And if it is, then we'll continue to part 2, which is looking at the application process itself. So how do we actually apply for it? So see you in that video. Thank you.